What's up, true believers? This is an epic collection I've wanted to read for a long, long time, and there's a reason for that. What happened with these Marvel epic collections for Spider-Man is that they actually don't always come out in order in terms of numbers. That's why they don't have the numbers on the spine or anything like that. So you can just have a random one. You could just kind of pick it up and get a nice snapshot of Spider-Man during a certain time period. Now, this Death of Captain Stacy is kind of towards the end of the Stan Lee era. It's not his last issue. His last issue is 110, and this goes up to 104. But Stan Lee's starting to back off. Roy Thomas is writing a couple issues at this point in time. John Romita was drawing most of it, and then he gets taken over by Gil Kane for a few issues also. So this encompasses Amazing Spider-Man 86 to 104. It's volume 6, 1970 to 1972, as I said. And the reason I'm so excited about this is they came out with volume 7 years and years ago. And I've been waiting. They come out with volume 4 one year, 5 the next year, and then finally 6, which means I can finally get to that volume 7, which is actually the Gwen Stacy Green Goblin classic. And I've never actually read that. So I've been like excited just to get through Spider-Man up to this point to get over to there. All right, gosh, I'm a minute into this and I still haven't started the review. But my name is John Delarose. I am a #1 best-selling author and comic creator. If you want to check out my stuff, I've got an Amazon link in the description below. Please support the channel, read the books. I really appreciate you guys that do so. They're awesome. All right. It starts out with the Black Widow. This is actually contained within the Black Widow Epic Collection also. And you see her, she's tracking down Spider-Man here, and she's hunting him to kind of see what his powers are like and how if she can kind of be like him. Now, this was her kind of more original costume, and she changes costumes over the course of this to become more like the Black Widow we know later. Here she is. You can see her now. Sleeker, sexier design. And, John Romita is actually wonderful at drawing women and action shots. And so this is just a joy to look at on every level. Yeah, you just kind of got a Mary Jane look there a little bit. It is what it is. They have their little superhero fight where it's, not really a fight. And then Black Widow kind of realizes Spider-Man's like, all right, and kind of goes away. And this is used to advertise the fact that she's going to be having her own tales in Amazing Adventures, which then takes place after this. All right. And having some problems. Spider-Man's getting sick. Something's going down. And he's looking at this. There's something wrong with him completely. You can see just the tortured look. What a beautiful art piece right here. Look at just like, the perspective's cool. Love it. And you can see a little John Romita Jr. So how a junior gets a lot of that squared off look on his characters. Gets that a little bit from his dad here. Not to the extreme that he did at that point, but cool stuff nonetheless. Issue number 87. It's going to be hard to go over all these issues because there's a lot of content in here. But Spider-Man is getting sick, not feeling well, and he takes off his mask, and he's in danger of getting outed through all this. And so he actually has the Prowler, who owes him a favor, go into his house and show up as Spider-Man while Peter's there, just to kind of deflect any thought that Peter might actually be Spider-Man. When Peter was sick, he actually just went down and said he was Spider-Man, but they all thought he was delirious and sick, and so he played it off as that. It starts to get a little iffy in some of these like superhero secret identity portions of this. We get a few issues of Dr. Octopus. Now, as far as the villains go in this era, it's much like Volume 5 and Volume 4. Stan Lee really went to a point where he just wanted to bring back the classics. Let's do the hits again. Let's have John Romita do Dr. Octopus yet again. And he breaks out of prison. And of course he comes back. And we have an interesting fight here between Spidey and Dr. Octopus. It just feels like there's a little less personal stakes involved in these fights than like those original ones. And you kind of know the outcomes a little more than you did in those original ones. And so it feels like they're just trying to bring it back to bring back the popular things and kind of phoning it in a little bit. I gotta say that. It's all right. I mean, I still love it. I would say John Romita's panel layouts are fast-paced. You can read through these pretty quick. Stan Lee's actually dialed back the dialogue quite a bit by this point in his career. In the beginning, like in the 60s early, like he would actually just have so much dialogue on the panels, and you can see how he's toned it down so that the pacing's a lot better. I would just say that the stakes and the personal interest is not quite as much as it was before. You got J. Jonah Jameson going that Spider-Man, rah! Of course. And we have, this is the third Dr. Octopus thing, and here we go. At the end of this, this big water tower falls, and Spider-Man's falling to his death. And there's a problem throughout all this where there's Stacy. Spider-Man's not feeling good through this, and he gets brought back. You get the feeling that Captain Stacy kind of knows who Spider-Man is, and Gwen, of course, is Spider-Man's girlfriend at the time. Look at the beautiful, beautiful drawing of females. It's like a masterclass in drawing of women. He just, is perfect almost, John Romita. I love the coloring on this panel right here with the shading for Peter. And they help him out, get him back going, and he's back fighting Dr. Octopus again. Now, these type of pages, they did half-page advertisements, and a lot of these in the original, so they just put a stamp there. I actually wish they would keep the advertisements. Those were a fun part of reading a lot of those comics. You get those like Muscle Men, and that'd be a neat thing to keep in here. Back to the fight, and as a building crushes, Captain Stacy saves a child's life, but he gets crushed in the rubble himself. Spoiler alert, but the spoiler's right there. So, and Spider-Man carries him off, and everybody thinks he killed Captain Stacy because Spider-Man carried him off. Turns out Captain Stacy did know who Spider-Man was, and he was Peter Parker the whole time, and gives him his blessing for his daughter, basically. Now things get complicated for their relationship as Gwendolyn really hates Spider-Man all of a sudden. She starts working with this anti-superhero guy running for mayor. Lots of running for mayors in Marvel Comics. And he is a shyster at the end of the day, but we don't see it. Iceman attacks, and this is another superhero little battle. Everybody thinks that Spider-Man's attacking Gwen Stacy, but he's not really. He's actually trying to protect her from this bad dude, but Iceman doesn't know that, and so they have a little fight. And the Prowler comes back here. Prowler must have been pretty popular. Or at least they were trying to make him pretty popular at the time. He shows up a lot in these last 20 issues or so since his first appearance. And this time the Prowler thinks that, he must have had me play Spider-Man so that he could mess with Gwen Stacy, because he keeps messing with her. And so he actually attacks Spider-Man for the same reasoning Iceman did. It's the same plot kind of regurgitated again from the first one right before then. Like I said, a lot of these plots are kind of silly. They kind of aren't quite as good as the early ones, but they're working out all right. John Romita gets Sal Buscema's help here. Sal Buscema does a lot of Spider-Man work over the years from this point forward. And we get a character called the Beetle. This is just some standard superhero fights as this goes on. It's fun stuff. And then what happens is Gwen Stacy goes to London. Now, this is an interesting one in Spider-Man history, and it's because later on, there's going to be this story by J. Michael Straczynski called Sins Past. And there's some stuff that happens in that that's very controversial for Spider-Man fans. They hated that story when it came out, and still hate it, as Gwen Stacy disappears to London and goes off to live with her uncle or whatever. And eventually Peter Parker's like, I can't live without her. I'm going to London too. And oddly decides to swing around as Spider-Man during that. He actually does mention it in dialogue that, maybe Gwen's going to figure this out if Spider-Man's here and I'm here. She better not see me. Yeah, she better not. It's pretty dumb, Peter. But okay. But since past, during this period, apparently Norman Osborn is out there and wooing her and impregnates her over the course of this, and she has kids during the course of this while she's in London here. It's a sketchy continuity at best, but man, you can't read this without remembering the stupid Sins Past thing, and that does taint the story a little bit. Pretty standard stuff. Spider-Man's just after some bad dudes who are terrorists, and he doesn't actually get to see Gwen in London is what ends up happening. So falls down on his bad luck, and he comes back home, and guess who's there? The Green Goblin. Like I said, it really, really gets you on that Sins Past thing. But what can you do? Stan Lee couldn't have known that at the time. So the Green Goblin's back, and the Green Goblin has like memory problems where he forgot he's the Green Goblin. He remembered that Peter was Spider-Man, but forgets it as Norman Osborn. It's a very weird storyline. The way they do it's very cheesy in the dialogue. It's like, I just don't remember things. Hello, Peter. And very odd. So, but eventually the Green Goblin does come back because that's what they promised in the issue. And then we get our greatest hits again, as I said. Now, Gil Kane's taking over the art here, and you can see kind of a difference. I would say that like Gil Kane's art looks a little more from that like horror-y bent. Looks, you know, it's more towards Ditko and less like Romita is just very smooth and pretty. And everything's a little more lighthearted looking. But Gil Kane takes it to a different spot. You can see Spider-Man's face is really rounded here. There's some issues. There's some panels where it looks really funky, like this one. And Romita really never did that. That's just a really round head. The Green Goblin fight happens, of course. And what's interesting is this is where Harry Osborn kind of changes a little bit. This is the type of stuff Ditko really wouldn't have liked at all. Harry Osborn now is like becomes a drug addict over the course of this, and he's having major problems. And Spider-Man's like trying to deal with that while dealing with the Green Goblin, basically. And as this comes across, he actually like makes Norman remember that he's Harry's kid, and that's how he knocks out the Green Goblin and makes him forget he's the Green Goblin. It's ridiculous, but that's the plot. And yeah, Gwen Stacy again, like Gil Kane is he's a fine artist. In the plots and the layouts are fun. Just, you know, Gwen Stacy's just not quite as pretty as it was under Romita. You just can't do that. And they get back together. She's back from Europe now, so that's that. All right, panic at the prison, and that is exactly what it sounds like. These prisoners are escaping, and they're trying to protest these conditions, basically. They're not all that bad, and Spider-Man gives a lecture on prison conditions. Okay. And then we get to the 100th issue. Sweet, I actually had this issue. Issue 100 of Spider-Man. How exciting. And this is a lot of flashback stuff through this. He's losing his powers, has some problems, there's issues going on, and he's like, I'm going to get rid of my powers so I can be with Gwen, and he does some weird science-y things where it's clearly just, I'm doing science in a montage, and that means beakers, and test tubes, yes, and then he takes it, and then he has all these weird visions of every frickin' villain he's ever fought. It's pretty cute. This sort of thing happens in a lot of these milestone issues where they always like go over all the major villains and all that. And then there's a twist at the end. He's grown arms. Oh my gosh, he's the man spider now, I guess. And then things start to change again. So yeah, we've had a pretty stagnant several issues with like not really new villains. We've got rehashes of Doc Ock and Green Goblin and all that, but now we have Morbius, and this is the origin of Morbius, the first time he appears. Origin actually appears next issue. This is where Roy Thomas actually is scripting Spider-Man for the first time. So, change in scripters. I'm not a big fan of Roy Thomas's dialogue. You can see there's a ton more dialogue than there used to be in with Stan Lee. You can see how much it slows down the pace when he's talking to Gwen and he's hanging out and he's like, I can't see you tonight, Gwen. I'm sorry. Very Ditko-esque drawing here comparatively to Romita. And he's got 6 arms now, so he's freaking out. Now Morbius shows up, and Spider-Man, of course, sees Morbius trying to eat people's blood and things like that, and we have to have a fight. So it starts. And Spider-Man's talking to Doc Connors because he knows that Connors can help maybe with his problem with his arms or whatever. And, of course, he becomes the Lizard. So in the next Morbius one, we get Morbius versus the Lizard versus Spider-Man. And the Lizard is like half Connors, like in the brain at this point. So he sometimes thinks of Spider-Man as an ally, but sometimes he just loses himself to that lizard brain. And that goes and becomes a problem. And this is where you get the Morbius origin. And I really like this page right here. Very cool. Very 70s. And we learn that this was a man who was dying, and he tried to do an experimental procedure on himself, and it made him into a basically vampire. So that's that. And Of course, those 2 issues are in the Morbius Epic Collection also. So if you've read that, then you've seen those separately, and I have. And then eventually they get the cure because it's in Morbius's blood for some reason. And they get a vial, and Spider-Man's able to take it, and his arms go away, and his powers are back. The end. All is reset. And so that's that. And then Spider-Man ends up going to the Savage Land. Why? It's kind of weird. So this is a strange story. And for some reason, Gwen comes along, and so does J. Jonah Jameson. It really is kind of nonsensical. But there's a story to be had. And so Jameson wants to have it because the Bugle's having problems with money. And so they need to do something real quick. And you can see the Roy Thomas dialogue. It's just almost covering up all the art. I know a lot of people probably really like Roy Thomas, but it slows it down too much for me. And a little Gwen cheesecake action here, because, she's in the Savage Land. I don't know, the reason for her to come along on the, trip to the Savage Land was just very thin and kind of ridiculous. J. Jonah, stop staring at Gwen. Yeah, there you go. But they end up having, their sort of deal where they have to fight this dude, and it's a 2-issue deal. Most of these stories with, around this Marvel point in time, set everything up in one issue and then resolve things in the next issue. So a lot of 2-issue stories, you saw that all the way across, dating back to, the Stan Lee stuff at the very beginning of this. Just seems to be the format that they like to do. Leave that cliffhanger, and then come back to it. And so Kraven the Hunter's here. There's a creature here who's an alien, and there's lots of fighting, and eventually it all sort of just ends easy come, easy go, as our heroes interact with Kazar and then have to go home. And that's that. And that's the entire deal for Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6. I took a while with this one, but, I love it. I'm happy here. Even though I kind of am poo-pooing this era a little bit before some major events happened and all that, I really still had fun with it. And the death of Captain Stacy is a major life event in this for Peter Parker. So was getting a couple extra arms there for that period. Morbius first appearance. This is some classic stuff, but it is mixed in with some stuff that's just kind of rehashing stuff that's happened before. So good overall. I'd say 8.5 out of 10. Some of my favorite Spider-Mans, of course, I've given 9 or 10 out of 10. Just a little lower than that, but still really enjoyable. I'm glad I read all this in order. Hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a message for me down below, and we'll be back soon.